think of smoking a cigarette, I'm sure you think of the smoke, the smell, the pollution, maybe even some health effects. But through a new invention, smoking has been modernized. On the left, you will see a traditional cigarette. On the right, you will see an electronic cigarette. Instead of smoking and burning tobacco, now you're going to vaporize nicotine solution. And this is an electronic cigarette. I also have an example of one. I brought one with me if anybody wants to see it. At the end, this is the battery. At this end is the cartridge, and in the middle, there's a heating element. It heats up the liquid nicotine, vaporizes it for the user, and they can smoke it like a traditional cigarette. On the end, there's also an LED light that lights up to show the smoker that they're inhaling it up. This is an example of an electronic cigarette company, White Cloud. It's actually this company. There's batteries down there at the bottom. You can charge them using a USB outlet or a wall plug. And on the right, you can see that there are different cartridges. There's extra strength nicotine cartridges all the way down to 0. In addition, you can get different flavors. There's fruit, tobacco, candy, all kinds of things that actually are appealing to children, which is not a good thing, but it helps smokers deal with their craving of tobacco. They can change to something else. You can also get a cover to go over this. This is a disposable one, but they make ones that are rechargeable, like this one right here, and you replace that cartridge on the end. So, a short history. They actually were first seen in 1965. Herbert A. Gilbert from Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, was granted the first patent for the smokeless non-tobacco cigarette. In 1980, they reemerged in the form of a favored smokeless tobacco cigarette, but they were sent a cease and desist letter from the FDA claiming that they were an unregulated medical device. We haven't heard of them again until 2003 when a Chinese pharmacist, Han Lick, actually invented them. He was tired of seeing his dad suffer from smoking-related illness and himself. He wanted something new. He invented the smokeless modern cigarette, and his company Ruan produced it in China, and it has spread throughout the United States. You'll see in other countries. Wells Fargo estimated that last fall sales of electronic cigarettes were going to reach over $1 billion. And to prove that this is so, Loriller, the third biggest big tobacco industry, bought Blue e-cigs. You might have heard of them. They have television ads, print ads, they're just about everywhere. And their sales were $61 million last year, but they had a $1 million profit. Next, the biggest tobacco firm, which is Philip Morris, came out with their own Mark 10, and R.J. Reynolds came out with the View cigarette. It was actually announced this spring that Philip Morris was going to buy Green Smoke of Israel. So all the big tobacco companies are expanding into e-cigarettes. They know this is where the industry's going. Here's some ads for you. Rise from the ashes. This is Blue e-cigs. And on the left is Enjoy. You might have seen this at convenience stores. These are the more disposable ones. They're a little bit lower quality. Now, there's a difference between traditional cigarettes and electronic cigarettes. It's obvious. But electronic cigarettes still contain a nicotine solution, and they can be classified as a tobacco product. From the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938, a tobacco product is defined as anything made or derived from tobacco that is intended for human consumption. On the other hand, a drug or device is defined as an article intended for the use in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of a disease, or intended to affect the structure of the body. Now, if you think about nicotine, it does have sort of a pharmacological effect on the body and the brain. So you could see either way how they could be defined. Of course, e-cigarette companies want them to be defined as tobacco, whereas the FDA is saying that they're an unregulated medical product. We shall get to that. In order to understand that, we have to understand the intention of the inventor. Lick's patent says that they contain nicotine without the harmful tar. So they're intended to be a less harmful product, right? They're only water, vapor, and nicotine. But White Cloud, which is the company I showed you, says that the product is not marketed for use as a smoking cessation product, and it's not intended for use by non-smokers. It's a recreational smoking product to them. But consumers also see it differently. Through my research, I found so many different comments and forums about smokers that have switched to e-cigarettes, completely eliminated their use of cigarettes through these means. And these are just some quotes from, I found them very important. I had no intention of quitting. I tried e-cigs merely out of curiosity, and from the very first taste, it was so clean and full of flavor. I haven't touched an e-cigarette since. Another person from Canada said, I have 40 years of smoking, 2 packs a day. I wanted to see if I could cut back. I started vaping, which is what smoking is technically called when you're using an e-cigarette, and that was 9 months ago. I haven't touched an analog cigarette since. These are just 2 examples of the many examples that I've seen online. In order to understand the intentions and where we're going with regulation, it's important to understand tobacco regulation, a little bit of the history. In 1996, the FDA decided to say that cigarettes were medical devices. So in 2000, Brown & Williamson Tobacco Company decided that they were not going to stand for this, and the courts ruled that this was not Congress's intention. The FDA is not included in the tobacco or the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and they don't have the authority to regulate cigarettes. They're not a medical product. They cause irreparable harm to the body, and if they were regulated as a medical product, they would have to be banned. This regulatory gap was closed in 2009 with the Tobacco Control Act. It bridges the gap. It allows the FDA a little bit of control over cigarettes and tobacco products. They can set the buying age. They restrict advertising and packaging. I don't know if you've ever seen on the news, they're trying to add more graphic packaging to cigarettes to try to dissuade people from using them. They require approval of new tobacco products, but they cannot ban specific tobacco products. And now we come to the modern cigarette. In 2009, Smoking Everywhere was importing electronic cigarettes, and they were detained by the FDA. Claimed again that they were new, unapproved drug and medical devices. Smoking Everywhere wasn't going to have this. They decided to file a preliminary injunction, which was upheld. Smoking Everywhere dropped out of the suit, but Cetera continued on with it. And the courts, in the court case, decided that, again, the FDA cannot regulate cigarettes or e-cigarettes as medical devices, which is the same as the Brown and Williamson outcome. But e-cigarettes containing nicotine derived from tobacco are defined as tobacco products. They are not explicitly listed in the Tobacco Control Act, so they cannot be regulated by the FDA yet. But the FDA is looking to do that. They vowed on their website to regulate e-cigarettes as well as hookah, cigars, pipe tobacco, novel products, and other future tobacco products. This was last fall. They want to incorporate them into the Tobacco Control Act specifically, and as we saw, I don't know if anybody follows the news, yesterday they officially proposed this rule. It's going. So, 2 senators have actually proposed that e-cigarettes be taxed the same as traditional cigarettes. It's only water vapor, but they want to tax them the same way and close the tax parity because they're losing revenue on traditional cigarettes. So, taking the first steps are actually the states. They're outdoor and indoor smoking bans in New York City, Chicago, and Los Angeles because people perceive them as the same evil as traditional cigarettes. They also, some states restrict sales to minors, which I think is reasonable seeing that they restrict sales of cigarettes to minors. And although some states like New York and Washington have decided that they want to tax cigarettes, the only one to implement it is Minnesota. They have a 95% tax. So my argument is that they should not be taxed. They're not the same product, but they should be regulated as a medical product. Some of the ingredients found in certain studies in the past couple of years have found propylene glycol, nicotine, TNSAs, and glycerol, which are normal for an electronic cigarette. Ethanol, formaldehyde, xylene, and other things are not. They need to have uniform standards for ingredients of electronic cigarettes. Another study compiled all of these, including the 3 I just talked about. And the only one to find DEG, which is an actual component of coolant in cars, was the FDA in one cartridge. They're the only ones to ever find that, and tobacco-specific nitrosamines were found in one, and those are also found in nicotine replacement therapies because they're part of nicotine. Nicotine replacement therapies are approved by the FDA. So in other studies, the complete blood count was analyzed, and it was found that smokers have increased blood count, such as white blood cells, but e-cigarette smokers and those subjected to e-cigarette smoke did not have the same. This group of people also conducted 3 different studies, each finding that e-cigarettes help people quit smoking. The one most recently was for a year, and it had 300 patients. People reduced their cigarette consumption by over 50% from the baseline each week. This supports the fact that addiction is related to the physical cues and not only the nicotine. Electronic cigarettes have a wonderful potential as a smoking cessation product, and they should definitely not be taxed the same as traditional cigarettes, seeing that they don't hold the same health concerns that traditional cigarettes do. Tax parity is not needed, it is not logical. The FDA, if they're really concerned about the health of the public, needs to help develop a safe cessation product and promote it as a safe cessation product that is not taxed the same. Thank you.